Hello, and welcome to the Legal Marketing Brief, the series where we showcase attorneys from across the country and learn about the strategies they use to market successful practices. I'm John Simpson, CEO of Convert Marketing. Today, we're sitting down with Jonathan Shbeeb and John Riordan. Based in North Carolina, Jonathan, and their partner Lance run Fidelity Law Group, a truly modern law firm. From their roots as a virtual firm started around the COVID pandemic, the firm now has 3 offices practicing estate planning, family law, business law, criminal defense, and real estate. We hope you enjoy our conversation with Jonathan and John. John Riordan, how did you decide to become an attorney, and when did the idea of becoming an attorney come to you?
It was a combination of things. I didn't initially, when I started my higher education, think that I was going to do that. As a matter of fact, I was intending to go into law enforcement of some kind. And ultimately, the doors that I thought might be open for that path ended up closing. So I have a criminal justice undergrad with almost a minor in business as well. And I thought law enforcement or business of some kind. That didn't end up working. But my entire life, everyone's always told me that I'm an analytical thinker, that I'm good at conversation, that I'm good at argument. And I thought, well, if law enforcement doesn't work, maybe I just cut off the enforcement part and see how that works. So that's ultimately what brought me to law school.
And you just so happen to be open to another 3 years of school. Is that?
That was not my favorite prospect. But yeah, it was convenient. The school that I went to had a law school attached, and I knew the town. I met my wife there. We were getting married, so it kind of all fell together.
Great. So, Jonathan Shbeeb, let's throw that same question at you. So, how did you get into this business of becoming a lawyer?
Man, similarly, I had the experience of people telling me throughout elementary school, junior high, high school, hey, you like to argue, go be a lawyer, right? And my family, my father's from the Middle East. He immigrated here, opened up a small business. He and my mom got married. They ran multiple small businesses. We saw them go up, go down, everything along that way. And just sort of one of the biggest things was having an attorney would have been very helpful throughout a lot of this process. Now, I went to school, wanted to work as a CIA agent, wanted to do anything international strategic intelligence, something like that. But then I met a woman, and it turned out that wouldn't be conducive to a marriage. So I moved up to New Jersey. I worked for a dry ice blasting company for a year. And then I got to work with an attorney up in New Jersey. I went in his office and said, hey, I'm curious about this. I'll work for free for a month. You tell me what my worth is. I have no skills related to this. And he said, no, I'll pay you. And he gave me a fair hourly rate. And he asked me to transition his office from completely paper filing system, completely. And it's a uh, debt collection for healthcare practice. So a lot of paperwork to a cloud-based service. So I worked for him for about 6 months, and then he said, "You need to go to law school." And so we chatted for a while, and I applied all over the place. Decided on Liberty University because that's where my wife and I met, and that's how I got in touch with John Riordan and Lance Edmonds, who are now my partners in the business.
Well, it's funny between your backgrounds. There's a couple of similarities. One is you both had this sort of law enforcement slash intelligence bent, right? That you were sort of thinking about, and then interestingly, a woman came along the way, both in going to law school. So it actually leads very well into my next question, which was, you met in law school, but how did you know that you guys actually wanted to partner together?
Can I take this one, John Riordan?
Yeah, of course.
I would say this: when I went to law school, I had the full idea of going to eventually. I wanted to run my own business. I don't know if I wanted to be a law practice per se, but I didn't like the idea of being tied to a desk in a cubicle the rest of my life. I knew that a law degree would help me get there eventually. And so when I first walked in, I was a little bit older, about 2 years older than the rest of the crowd, and I decided I'm going to find the person that looks like they're serious about this and they're going to work hard. I happened to sit next to John Riordan. We jived well, and it just looked like this was kind of meant to be. We both had the same name. We both gotten married recently. We both had this aspect of, hey, we didn't really want to do law school, but now we're here and we're good at it. And then as we went through the process, we realized if we wanted to live our dream, which was we really care mostly about our families. We care about our families, about our friends, and about the people we'd serve. It may require us to do our own thing. And so we got together in our third year, took a law office management class, and that allowed us to prepare a business plan for a law firm we wanted to open. And we were graded on it. And fortunate enough, the professor that taught the course was the dean of the law school, who had actually helped as a partner at a pretty sizable law firm in North Carolina where we wanted to practice. So pitching him all of our ideas and saying this is a real world opportunity that we want to pursue, he was able to direct us and say, hey, this is not realistic, or this is, maybe do different market research, do this, do that. That's sort of how we went down that path.
We don't often hear of lawyers actually taking that law management class, but we know how valuable having that business background can be. I'd be curious to ask both of you guys, what was one or two takeaways from that class that really helps you as a owner of a law firm today?
I would say one major takeaway that I can identify is that we were taught never to overextend in our practice. Meaning, some people will say, okay, I'm going to be starting a law firm. I'm going to hire a paralegal, an administrative assistant, buy everybody equipment, rent an office, get a billboard, X, Y, Z, all that. What we were taught was make a plan, follow the plan, and incrementally grow. So if you don't need to buy a $6,000 industrial printer right now because you don't have any lawsuits that you need to print 20,000 pages just yet, well, don't make that expense yet. Even though you think, well, I might need it at some point. Well, you can go to Staples for now. You don't need to have a billboard because you can do mailers, and that's a little bit cheaper. Do that. For us, it came in the form of, we actually started the firm virtually. So this concept of not biting off more than we could chew, staying out of debt, and not overextending, I think that's something really valuable that we learned from the class and from our dean that we've put into practice, and that has been successful for us so far.
That's such great advice. I mean, when I think of folks that are hiring you guys or hiring a lawyer, the last thing they want to be worried about is the lawyer themselves concerned that they're overextended, right? I mean, you guys can be more clear-headed and provide better insight to your clients if you're truly present on their matter, not your own, right?
Yeah, and not only that, but it also allowed us to save on overhead and debt, which allows us to pass on some savings to our clients and not be maybe quite as expensive as some colleagues, especially in Charlotte where things are just getting more and more expensive.
What I'd like to do is learn a little bit more about your practice. So you do have a broad scope in terms of everything from business law to estate-related situations, criminal law, and family law. Can you give me an overview of the scope of the Fidelity Law Group's practice today?
There's three partners at the law firm: Lance Edmonds, John Riordan, and myself. Lance Edmonds has always had his heart set on doing family law and criminal law. And so we've kind of used him as sort of a resource for all of the rest of our clients, which the rest of our law firm focuses on three really things, which is estate practices, business, and real estate. So those things have a common thread, right, which is property. It's how you get more property and dealing with the property you have, and then dealing with it after you've passed away. So a small business owner, for instance, they have to create an estate plan, right? They have to deal with what happens next. Is there a succession to this? Most of the time, what they do will come into play with real estate. And then eventually, right, we deal with family members who are obtaining a business or obtaining real estate through an estate practice. So those three things are intertwined, and Lance Edmonds has kind of been the perfect resource for our firm. It's nice to have a law firm that can help small businesses. As a small business owner, it's almost a child to me, right? It's something that I do and I breathe all day long. And sometimes along the way, I might run into a criminal issue. I might run into a traffic issue or a family law issue. And so to have an attorney to say, this is my family's attorney, they handle my business, they handle all of this. We use Lance Edmonds as sort of that resource, that connection to the rest of the thread of our business. So even though the thrust is towards how you get property, how you maintain it, and then how you dispose of it, Lance Edmonds has been integral, and we couldn't do anything without him as far as being a resource for the rest of our clients.
Yeah, that's the way you framed it. The scope makes a lot of sense, and I can see the value it would provide to clients because, they might be working with you on a real estate matter, but then something else comes up in their life, and even though you're, say, the real estate guy, they're still going to call you because you're their lawyer. So looking across the three partners, how do you think your clients would describe you guys when you're at your best? What is the thread that all of you guys do that brings you together and adds value for your clients?
I think for me, what I've heard firsthand from clients and even from colleagues, even opposing counsels that I've worked with, I've heard this about all three of us and about our other staff, because we try to make sure that this is the kind of environment we're maintaining. So our managing attorney, Tyler Crawford in Statesville, and our administrative assistant, I mean, every role, what we're trying to convey is communicative and transparent. We are not in the practice with our law firm of being the guys that are overly aggressive and hide the ball and try to take advantage at every single turn. We think we can get things done a lot better and more efficiently and effectively for our clients by being competent and appropriately aggressive, but also transparent and open to the extent of saying, hey, this is information that we know is bad for us, and this is information we know is really good for us, and I think you know it's good for us too. So how can we make this work for both of our clients in an adversarial setting, for instance? And then communication. One of the number one complaints that clients have of lawyers is that they can't get through to them. They're not communicative. And one of the things that I've received compliments on regarding everybody in my firm was that we are communicative. There's multiple different avenues of communication that we provide for our clients, and we try our best to always respond to people promptly, keep them informed about their case, not leave everyone hanging. And it goes a long way. Even messaging someone and saying, hey, I just want to let you know I've checked with the court. We still don't have an answer on that filing, but I just wanted to give you an update. When they haven't heard from you for a week or 2 weeks, that I've received compliments and saying, well, thanks so much for keeping me up to date, because there wasn't really an update, but I still appreciate you reaching out. So yeah, I think those are two major things.
You guys were founded, as I understand it, in 2019. And I'd be curious, as a small business owner, I've been there myself. There had to be many pivots along the way, right? Can you talk to us about, maybe some of those most important pivots or curveballs or epiphanies you had in the last 6 or 7 years running the business?
We've definitely had some pivots as we get going. I think John did a great job of mentioning earlier. One of the things that made our practice successful, I think, was incremental growth. And so that also meant, we take an opportunity and we analyze it in a small snippet. So let's say 3 months or 6 months. Does this work for the firm? And so I remember, I can picture it right now, sitting in our apartments, which we had apartments in the same complex. We could see each other's apartment across the way. We working and talking, and we're trying to build the website and saying, shoot, I don't know how to build this website, right? Well, let's figure it out, right? How do we do backlinks? What is a backlink? How do we make it so that people can get a hold of us, right? So we built a website. We loved it. Turns out it wasn't the greatest website. We had somebody else make it, right? We've gone through multiple iterations of, for instance, right, using Google advertising or other online marketing services. And I think for us, it was realizing that, hey, we have to put out money to decide if something works, right? We have to test the market. There's no other way around it. We have to test the market, and that's going to require some level of risk. So we put out some risk, and there were some opportunities that definitely didn't work, which is actually why we're here talking to you today. This opportunity obviously worked. And so that's kind of what we decided was anytime that we got to an opportunity that didn't work, we would pivot and say, we have no emotional connection to this. Every decision we make is data driven. And if it's data driven, we can make better decisions for our office and we can grow. And that's what we've done.
That is such an important perspective for, ultimately an entrepreneur, right? Is to have a healthy relationship with risk. And sometimes, as I understand it, it can run contrary to what people are trained in law school, right? Where you're trained to mitigate as much risk as possible. But the reality is to grow, you have to place some bets and understanding that that worked or that didn't, but failing fast, I think is really, really important. And we try and not only think about that with our clients, but also in our own marketing. We're constantly trying something to see, is there a sliver of something here that we can build on? And if not, that's okay. Small investment.
Just to dovetail off what you were just saying, one of the things that we actually have a policy within our firm that is pretty much exactly what you're talking about, failing fast, is the risk we're willing to take. We have what we call a 3-month rule. And what we do with that is we say, if we're going to try something new, whether it's a new form of advertising or opening an office and seeing if that's a good location, whatever, what we try to do is we try to do a minimum of 3 months for anything that we try. And what we say is, if we see that we're at least close to breaking even on whatever this thing is, we're going to go for another 3 months. And we're not going to give up on that task until we've put in that effort. Now, after 3 months, if we are in the hole for everything we've spent or more, then maybe we pivot from there and we say, okay, that's the cutoff right there. We're not going to try that right now, at least. Maybe we need to build up and try that again at some other point. But well, like you were saying, and it goes back to what we were talking about before about not biting off too much. That 3-month rule has served us really well. As a matter of fact, I think I told Jeremy about that the first time we had a consultation with Convert It. Was hey, we're going to try this, and he was like, well, that works because typically we say that we don't start seeing results for, I think at the time he told me 6 weeks or so, and then we should be able to start seeing some stuff come back within that 3-month period. So that's something that served us well.
One of the things that we always ask our account executives to talk about when they're doing consultations with potential clients is really to understand what the attorney or the firm's definition of success is, because that helps us understand how to position their marketing. The question I turn around and ask you guys is, collectively, what is your definition of success for the Fidelity Law Group?
We talk about this all the time, actually. And this is probably the reason that we worked so well together throughout law school. The reason that we attempted to start a firm during law school, launched it, and it's been successful since then. John, myself, and Lance, we all agreed that what's most important to us is our freedom and the people around us. And so for us, success means ensuring that we have that freedom to spend time with those we love, to do the things that we love, right? Instead of waiting until we're 95 years old to go do those things and spend time with those people. So when we make decisions as far as, will this be a good growth opportunity for the business, we keep that in the back of our mind. Will this require me to work 80 hours a week for the next 10 years? Well, I don't know if that's our goal for success. And when we hire someone, everyone says, and a law firm says, we really value work-life balance. Whether they do or not, we always tell people we really mean it, and we'll show you, right? On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I teach one of my son's sports classes. John goes with his daughter to, I think, gymnastics and parkour classes. Those are all things to us that we're like, maybe we can take some time away during the business day, and our philosophy and our platform allows us to do this. Even working from home for other employees. So our goal is, success is freedom to spend time with those we love.
What's also really interesting about this story is the fact that it sounds like you guys were in very similar phases of life when you started the practice. And I think a lot of times firms that we talk to, they all come from different phases of their lives and want different things. You guys were able to build this firm around your collective growing stage of life that you kind of were both sharing, having kids and being involved in their activities. And that's certainly unique from what we've seen. So tell us a little bit about your marketing journey. What's worked for you, and what were those things that got the 3-month extension, and what were those things that you said, hey, we're glad we tried it, but didn't work?
At a firm, we have 3 partners, and we each have kind of our own tasks. So Lance is in charge of all of the finances. We joke that if Lance were to just go ahead and elope to another country and drop us, John and I would probably have to shutter things up the next day, because I couldn't tell you how this bill gets paid or that bill. I mean, it would be a struggle. So Lance handles that. John handles some of our in person. He's a very personable guy, as I'm sure you can tell. He handles our kind of rainmaking in the sense of making in-person connections. I have been blessed with the role of kind of IT, including digital marketing and stuff like that. I can tell you that early on, John was talking about us sitting at the kitchen table building the website, which we did. We all kind of worked. We said, okay, you take the homepage, you take the About Us page, etc. And we were all building different things. But it was ultimately kind of my baby to make sure was complete and published and hosted. And at the time, I said, well, we should probably try to put some money aside for Google advertising, because it's 2020 and Google is everything. And not to mention, we started our firm about 4 or 5 months before COVID hit. And it just so happened that we decided to save some overhead and not overextend ourselves. So we had always planned to start as a virtual firm. Obviously didn't plan to have a global pandemic, but it turned out that when that hit, our operations didn't change too much, honestly. We had these systems in place for advertising, payment, doing our work, all that sort of stuff that was already virtual. So anyway, we started the marketing, Google marketing. I made a critical error pretty early on, which was, because we were virtual, we needed to do things a very particular way to be listed in Google. I didn't know that particular way. And so I got us flagged pretty immediately. And we just didn't have Google advertising for a long time because I could not get Google to communicate with me on fixing this. So one mistake we made was not trusting professionals earlier on in that regard. I'm all for entrepreneurs trying to do things themselves and saving money. But when it comes down to some highly technical things that there are professionals for, we are the biggest advocates for. Just like you'd hire us to do your legal matter instead of doing it yourself, hire the professional if it's something that is outside of your skill set. So made that mistake. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure if we got things fixed until right around the time that we found and joined Convert It. We've tried other things. We've tried mailers. We've tried referral services that are, a pay by the lead type of situation where they're specifically law based. That just didn't end up being fruitful. We did that 3-month plan and didn't end up paying off for us, even if we did did 6 months. And what has worked is trusting professionals to do what they do best to help us get our firm's name out there and to bring in business.
We see that a lot. It's understanding, and again, it's risk, right? Oh, am I going to spend the money to go hire a professional to do this, or can I kind of figure it out on my own? It sounds like you guys were able to, you understand the difference. And I'm not sure, every firm out there does. Obviously, you've built this practice. You're in multiple locations at this point. What's next for the Fidelity Law Group?
Well, what's currently on the horizon is we are launching an office in Gastonia, North Carolina. That office is going to be sort of a flagship new office for us. We're going to plug a new attorney in there. And as we grow, right, hopefully multiple attorneys into that office. That's just one aspect of our growth. We're looking to hire another attorney for our Statesville office. And then, oddly enough, we've talked about incremental growth as we've gone about this process. We're currently hiring somebody to be completely virtual as an attorney who has their own set of, let's say, advertising opportunities that we would never have had, a long-term practicing attorney. So we're taking a step out of our own old playbook. So we're opening now brick and mortar locations, one in Gastonia, and we're opening another virtual location.
Right. And you have an interesting approach to scaling. So, you're adding locations. Is the strategy to continue to add locations? Are you offering different services in those locations? Or are we focused on the scope that you're zeroed in on now?
Good question. So what we've kind of found is this. There's the big market of Charlotte, the big market of Raleigh in North Carolina, which is primarily where we practice. And in those markets, you have the lion's share of your attorneys. You have most of your attorneys in those two pockets. In the smaller counties, and as you separate further and further from Charlotte, we've seen that there's not as many attorneys who handle estate matters, specifically estate administration. People will dip their toes into it, but there aren't a lot of attorneys who just do that, who sort of fill that niche, that need, which is a big need, right? There's two things guaranteed in life, right? Death and taxes. And whether or not taxes will be guaranteed anymore, we don't know, but death will be, right? So that's kind of the approach we've taken, and that's what we're going to fill in those new locations. That's the sort of the concept of the growth. We're going to go into these smaller markets. We're going to provide a niche service, but also we want the attorney to become part of the community. We want them to be, like we talked about, sort of that family attorney to say, hey, that's my attorney. And if they have a need related to other matters, they can point them back to the main FLG and get those matters serviced by them.